Good morning. Thank you for coming. I am Mehul Harry, and this is Write Once, Deploy to Multiple Mobile Platforms. And I'll explain all about what that means. So a little bit about me. I'm the web program manager at this company called DevExpress. We've got that snazzy booth with the backlighting, all that good stuff, and the t-shirts with a cute little guy on it. And I'm the web PM there. So I do all these technologies with client side, server side, and I love it. So today, we're going to be talking about creating mobile apps. Now, I will tell you about why I call this Write Once, Deploy Anywhere, and where it makes sense. Sorry. Sure. Hey, can you? All right. All right. I will try this. Sorry about that. So, I will talk about creating mobile apps, challenges, opportunities. We have a platform. Now, in the past, when I did this talk, I was writing a lot of JavaScript. And to be honest, I don't think anybody wants to write JavaScript for like an hour. So I won't do that to you, I promise. But I think I've gathered some really great info for mobile development. So I'm assuming you guys are mobile developers. You're out there. You want to make money, or you're making some money, or maybe you're working for an enterprise. And when does it make sense? So we'll talk a lot about the big question I always get is hybrid versus native versus mobile web, and what the challenges are there. Now, I'll also show you a little bit about the framework that we have that delivers on this promise. Now, there's a lot of options out there, and I'm happy to talk about any and all of them. There's a certain philosophy that each one of these, if they don't take it, should take it. And so there's a certain philosophy, which I'll explain, that I think has some benefits. And finally, we'll just wrap it up. So the first thing I like to do is, show you. Let's just get right into some demos. All right, so these are some of the things you can build with it. Now, if you see this and you like it and you think that's the kind of cool stuff I want to make, this is what's possible, right? Now, this is all built using a hybrid app mobile development, and that's kind of what I'm going to try to convince you today. So there are a lot of our customers that do things like enterprise development, right? They want to show off some KPIs or just some information out there that's available, and they wanted mobile. So this was one version of an app that we built, and this same app can scale, right? So that when you run it on a phone, it presents a different view. Now, as I'll show you, this is a framework, and it comes with models and views and all that good stuff. But what's great about it is that it looks native regardless of the device. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But let me just go through a couple of the other demos. I like this one quite a bit because this is a storyline we had made that, let's say there's a store out there, and what they do is they sell skateboards. So when somebody walks into a skateboard, a salesperson might say, well, hey, let me help you build a skateboard. So they might actually walk around with it and say, well, what kind of deck do you like? That looks good. Or if I knew anything about skateboards, I would speak intelligently about skateboards, but unfortunately I don't. But you get the idea. You have a product that can build an order, and what's great about this system is it's beautiful. All these transitions that you're seeing are built right in, and what's useful is that you can do things like everything that you can do on a native mobile app, such as notifications and all that good stuff. Now, you can have the same app appear for an iPhone as well, or an Android, and all that good stuff. Now, I'll show you one last piece of thing. This was our realtor app. So let's say, for example, you wanted to build something, a real estate agent's out there, and they said, hey, listen, I'm out there showing some homes. I can add some things to my favorites, remove them, whatever the client likes as I'm going around. And in the same vein, you have this. So you can build beautiful hybrid mobile apps like this using our framework. So that's essentially one of the things I'm going to be trying to show to you today. All right, let's talk about the problem. this isn't just a mobile world anymore, right? When we obviously these things have been outselling and outpacing everything. This goes now into the realm of how do you say, multi-platform. And when we say multi-platform, we literally mean beyond mobile, we're talking about laptops. So, the demise of the desktop hasn't actually happened yet, right? Microsoft just released a 12-inch tablet. 12-inch tablet. Yeah, I don't know when a laptop starts and a tablet stops and a laptop starts. But hey, listen, people will buy that thing. It's regardless of how we feel about the device. As mobile developers, you have to support it, and that's the problem, right? This is the world we live in. So you have some choices on how you create these mobile apps. Now, you can do straight HTML5, which is just CSS, HTML5, and JavaScript. That's fine. That's called a mobile site, right? You can make it look like a native app, but it's still going to run in the browser. So the benefit here is that you're writing HTML5. Great. The downfall is that you don't really get a native experience. So what you can do is you can write a native app, and you get a native experience. The problem here is, well, there's quite a few problems, but one of the biggest problems really is that you can't go multi-platform with this, right? You can invest in Objective-C, you can become an awesome developer, and you can get out there and make, Angry Birds or something like that. Unfortunately, when you want to port that, you have to learn a different language. So there's a huge amount of cost associated with this. So the best of this is hybrid. Now, you've been hearing about this, I'm sure, for a couple years now. What hybrid really is the best of both worlds, where you get to write HTML5, where you're only writing in one language, JavaScript and CSS and HTML, and you also get the benefit of packaging it up as a native app, which means you can deploy to the App Store and get the benefit of putting it, making some revenue, sending the updates, and the costs are much cheaper. So cost-wise, I would say native costs them more in terms of resources, time to learn, and time to invest into. HTML5 is the cheapest. Unfortunately, you don't get to package it up. Now, the biggest challenge, though, with these is that hybrid and HTML5 have some big challenges, right? And the biggest one being performance. So I'll talk about that in just a bit. All right, now, this is the biggest question about this. Now, if you're afraid of JavaScript, I'm sorry, there's no way around this. This is a lot of times people ask me, yeah, but is this JavaScript? Yes. I deal with a lot of customers, the company I work for, a lot of our customers are from the Microsoft background. So they'll hear something like Xamarin or there's some different approaches to making native apps. I'm not the Xamarin approach, and there's a couple other approaches like that are not bad. They don't abstract you away from knowing the framework. They don't abstract you from knowing Cocoa and so forth. Yes, you might be writing in a different language, but you're not truly abstracted away from having to know the eventing system for Cocoa and stuff. Versus a hybrid approach really makes it much easier. All right, so let's talk about challenges. SMEs. SMEs are small to medium enterprises. Now, this is they fear apps, but this is not just small to medium enterprises. This is just in general, and I think you'll know what I'm talking about. When you're out there trying to convince somebody that they should have a mobile app, these are the top 5 reasons. Now, if you're really interested in I'll make the slide deck available. Take a look at that article below. They talk about these challenges and how you can mitigate them, how you can get around them. So the first is they feel they have a mobile website and how a mobile website is enough. Or there's no money. How am I going to create an app? I have no money, I have no resources, and why should I bother? What value is there for the customer? So all this just demonstrates a basic lack of understanding about why apps are important. Now, again, I'm assuming we're all mobile developers here. So I think it's incumbent upon us to have a decent answer for each one of these. And the first and foremost is that if these things are selling like hotcakes, if these things are literally taking over the world, and if we're carrying them in our pocket everywhere and every day, then you should absolutely have a mobile experience, a native mobile experience if possible, or a native-like mobile experience. So a mobile website doesn't cut it because, if you've ever tried to check into an airline flight from like Delta.com or United, you'll know that the app experience is much better In fact, some of these newer ones, apps, are great because they integrate into things like Passbook. So when I get my QR code, I don't have to try to snap a picture of it and load the picture while I'm getting in line. So it's all about experience. You're not going to be able to do that through a mobile website. Now, as far as money and resources, if these things are everywhere, it's a chance to make money. That's just my opinion. So I would highly recommend you take a look at some of those things. Now, I'd mentioned before about the cost of native approach. Now, native approach requires you to have somebody that knows how to write in native. Objective-C, Cocoa, etc., or Java, or C# or C++. So it's way more time consuming, and it requires just a little bit too much. Now, I saw this tweet the other day. This is Bill LaBus. He's actually a native developer, but he had this little tweet that was kind of funny. Bless you. All right, so here he's showing off some Objective-C code. Now you can see all of this Objective-C code is the same as this bit of code down here, and all that bit of code is doing is just styling some address lines. Now, that doesn't mean Objective-C stinks. It just means that these are the kind of things you have to learn to pick up. All right, now, the other big question I get about hybrid development, right? What a Okay. What about PhoneGap? Now, if you're not familiar, PhoneGap is a library that Cordova, PhoneGap, the naming is confusing, but essentially it lets you access the resources and of the native of the device. So if you need access to the GPS, if you need access to the camera, et cetera, PhoneGap is the way to go, right? It's kind of like the jQuery of the way, right? jQuery solved a problem, PhoneGap has solved a problem. You wouldn't try to rewrite that. That's the way to go. So it's fantastic. Now, another service they provide is they provide a way for you to package your app and then deploy it natively. So let me step back one little bit. The one thing I didn't mention about hybrid apps, because they're HTML, if you didn't know, they run in what's called a web view. Now, a web view essentially is not the browser. It uses the browser's rendering engine. And there's some real challenges with that, which kind of stink. We'll talk about it in a minute. But the biggest problem with the HTML5 and PhoneGap approach is that when you write for iOS and Android, that's how it looks. And that's not native. And that's what your users know. Your users will obviously know, like, yeah, this person has obviously not put in any effort to give me a decent experience, right? I mean, fair enough. If you're just trying to get something up and out, PhoneGap is great for that. But you really want to get, what I like to use PhoneGap for is really to access the native resources. And I think that's its best field. So what you want to do is you want to invest in a library that does something beyond this. All right, so let's talk about that whole web view thing in the HTML browser. If you're not familiar, the device manufacturers, they provide this way for you to create apps. They want you to create native apps. They want you to first write on their platform, on their app market, because they want their 30%, right? And that's fine, and that's great. So, but they realize that you can't stop the web. The HTML5, regardless of Facebook's statement, which they kind of backed up on about how they wasted time making an HTML5 app when they should have made native, right? HTML5 is very much here. Every device manufacturer knows it, and some of them have actually made some great strides for developers. So the biggest problem is when you run a web view, you're gonna get a lower performance. In fact, sometimes way worse. So the Safari browser is much faster than when you run in a web view. Now, I just like to expose that. Why? Because I don't think it matters that much. It matters only when you're depending on what you're creating. So if you're creating a line of business application where you're showing a list of products and you're scrolling through them, it's not going to affect you. But if you're making Candy Crush, I would say, first of all, I wouldn't recommend our platform for Candy Crush. There's some real interesting players out here that are real good at that kind of stuff. But, as I'll talk to you about opportunities, I can tell you that for sure there's some lower time and cost that we can help you with. Now, hardware acceleration, memory problems, rendering, missing events, these things have all been well documented. There's a nice talk that I linked to as well. But each one of these is being addressed, or it's getting better with each release. Now, I can't say it's going to be perfect, but it is definitely getting better with each release. So, write once, deploy multiple, is that a lie? No, I don't think so, because it's HTML5 still, right? So HTML5 will work wherever there's a HTML5 browser. And this wasn't always the case. There was times when, let's say, I used to have, remember BlackBerry, somebody would contact me and say, hey, you support so-and-so, standard. I'm trying to run this on BlackBerry. And then it would just crash. And what happened was these mobile browsers weren't really full browsers, right? They would run stripped-down versions of JavaScript, or they would do funny things with the DOM. Anyways, these modern browsers on the mobile phones are fantastic. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the mobile developer Mindshare, and I promise you I'll jump into a demo soon. All right, so as you can see, the green is Android, iOS is in the blue. So Android is clearly winning. But what's interesting about this is where some of the opportunities are now in mostly the developing countries. For example, like East Asia, South America, and South Asia. So I wanted to show you this because, if you want to succeed, you don't want to deliver experiences like this. You want to deliver native-looking and native-feeling solutions like this. Now, this previous images I pulled from I forget the site's name, but it's a nice article. And the article itself says, hey, listen, PhoneGap is great for this, but it's not the best for getting a native-looking experience. And that's where you would use some framework like ours that I showed you earlier. So this is written once in HTML5 and JavaScript, and it automatically adapts. Excuse me. All right, so let me show you how this works. Quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with Visual Studio? Excellent. Okay. Everything I'm going to show you does not require Visual Studio. We have a customer base. We were started in like 98, and I don't know if anybody remembers like Delphi and ActiveX and all that. We used to do all that nasty stuff. Anyways, more recently, we still sell a lot of .NET stuff. So we wanted to make it easier for our customer base to get started here, right? And the biggest story is when you get on a mobile device, you don't actually have a connection to a server, right? Or your data doesn't exist on the phone. So how do we improve that story? And we just chose Visual Studio, and we're looking at other IDEs, but we chose Visual Studio to make it easier to get started. And it's very customizable, but what I wanted to show you is this story in particular and the integrations here, and I think why it's valuable. All right. So let's say I have some data. Now, the city of San Francisco makes available a set of data, and I'll show you in a minute. Let's call it something like Be Safe app. So in VS, we've got these file templates, and it's going to create this WCFO data service. Now, it sounds all scary, but don't worry. It's all wizard-driven so far. CMHDev/. So here you basically connect up. Now, if you have a OData service, fantastic. This can work with essentially any JSON-based data source. In this case, what I want to do is I have some data that I actually want to expose. And this is generally what most line of business developers want to do. They have some data, they want to put it out there, and so they'll choose, okay, well, how do I get it even out there? So this is that story. We said, well, you got your data. This is how you actually expose it. And so City of San Francisco, as I said, through that data.gov initiative, has made available the crime incidents in San Francisco. And you can take this things like these data, like the crime initiatives, and create a mobile app, right? So in this case, we're just taking that, downloaded that data up, imported in, and what this is creating for me is essentially just a data service. Now, take a look. Now, we integrate with NuGet, all that kind of good stuff. If you guys are familiar with VS, you'll know what that means. But here, I just have a data service, right? It exposes to me that crime incidents table. Now, great. So let's actually create the app portion of this now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new project to this. And I think this is where the real magic is, right? So let's call this B. In this, you get a wizard. Now, in this wizard, we provide several templates for you, right? So you can say, well, I want to make like a desktop-based client-side app, or I want to make it mobile, or I want to make it specific for Windows 8 or something like that. I'm going to choose mobile. And I should mention, you have an option to use TypeScript or JavaScript. TypeScript is something Microsoft created to help corporate developers with JavaScript. So navigation bar or slide out is a couple options that you have, and these are just previews, right? So far, this is just a, hey, how do you want to create this? Oh, I'll stick with the navigation bar. Now, this is my favorite part of it, I think, right? So here, I can put in any web-based data service. If you got something you've created with Ruby on Rails and exposed out there, pop it in here, right? So what happens is we can go investigate this, and it says, hey, listen, I found an entity in there. Do you want me to generate a model for it and some views for it as well? I'll say yes. And then when I hit finish, this is going to create for me an app. Now, this isn't just a, hey, listen, I've got an app, good, I'm ready to deploy. But it is very much that we wanted to make it, this is how easy it is to get started, right? Now, here's my data. Here it is for a different device. So on iPhone 5, it's going to look native. Now, right away, it chose from the table one of the key items. Now, it's smart enough to not choose the ID because that would just be boring. So instead, we got a list of the type of crime incidents. So let's take a look at burglary, and it gives us the information. So if I wanted to, I can even make this look a little bit prettier and say, instead of XY, plot it on a map. So show me where I am. And then I can take it further, integrate it with PhoneGap, and say, hey, listen, grab my local GPS, find out where I am, and tell me what incidents have happened and at what time of day. And maybe I need to pop up an alert. Hey, look, it's 11 p.m. There was a burglary in where you are standing right now. Get out of here. So you can make something very interesting just out of this data. What's great about it, though, is you've written once in HTML5, and you're getting a native look on each device. So for Android, or an Android tablet, or Windows Phone. And I think we're the only ones out there that support Tizen. In fact, I'm coming back in a couple of weeks to support this, to do a similar talk about Tizen. Now, if you're not familiar, how many of you are familiar with Tizen? Okay, I'll explain. So the best answer I can think of is it's a joint venture. I think Intel is part of it, so you can speak to Intel out there. But Samsung is probably one of the main ones, and a few other major players. But they are starting this platform. So they took a version of Android and forked it. Why did they do that? Well, I think my guess is Samsung got mad at Google for putting out their own phone when Samsung said, hey, Google, we made you rich, and we make the best phones for Android anyways. That's my guess. But regardless, we support it. And there isn't a whole lot of devices out there. I think there's a watch out there for Android. But what's great about it is that we have designers that have studied each of these platforms, so you don't have to worry about it. You're writing once, and you're deploying to all these platforms. So the best guess is that Tizen is probably going to be very big in Asia. So for each platform, as you can see, iPad, iPhone, Android, it looks native. Now, another key thing that I really like to push is the story of, okay, this is great. I got a nice emulator. Woohoo! How do I actually see what it looks like? So what you can do right now is scan that QR code from your device. And what you'll do is you're going to navigate to my machine. You're literally going to load up what I've got here on your phone, and it's going to show you in a native view. Now, we provide an app that lets you look at some more information like events and so forth. But what's great about this is it's a great debugging story. It lets you see exactly what is happening as you develop before you have to provision the app, package it up, deploy it to the App Store. So you can figure out. So you don't have to figure out once you deployed, is this going to work or not? This lets you solve those problems right away. All right. Now, we have some other integrations as well. I'll quickly show you. It's all HTML5 and JavaScript. So if you don't want, but we did add this little preview. I think it's kind of helpful to kind of see, because a lot of times you're just writing lots and lots of code and you're like, what does it look like? Do I have to run? So this little designer lets you see exactly what it's going to look like. All right. Let's move on. All right, so let's talk about the hybrid advantages. It's cross-platform, as we just saw. It's a single code base. You're writing JavaScript, HTML5. Things you already know. You're not reinvesting. It's way cheaper because you don't have to go relearn that stuff, and it is way easier. Because if you want to learn Objective-C, great. If you've got that kind of time, absolutely. If your manager allows it, if your client says, go spend the time, go buy some books, knock yourself out, right? I've got nothing against native development, right? In fact, I'll share with you my philosophy towards the end about development. But this also is much easier because if you do take a mobile-first strategy, there's a great blog out there from this guy named Luke Borbrowski. I can't say his last name. LukeW.com. Just look that up. And he talks about mobile-first. And mobile-first essentially says that when you're designing a site, start from the mobile first, right? There's different philosophies out there. I really like mobile first because it's, you have such a small surface that you have to make these hard choices about what's going to be in there. So rather than start big and start taking things away, start small and then start adding up and building up and saying, okay, this is what it's going to look like on an iPad. This is what it's going to look like on the desktop, et cetera, et cetera. So what's great about this is it scales up easily. And in that same view that I showed you, that with the little designer, in that same view, I can specify, hey, listen, if I'm on a form factor that's of iPad size or larger, like a Surface 12-inch, this is what I want you to add on this piece of white space here. So one view can handle all of that. So it scales up very easily. So you get beautiful experiences like this from one app. And you cover all of these mobile platforms. So our mobile platform obviously gives you a native experience and native UI, which is very important. So when you're scrolling, you're going to get as native as possible. Now, we fully work with any RESTful service, and we've done some extra things for Visual Studio, some wizards that make it really easy. Now, I didn't show you, but there's also, and if you'd like, I will show you, but there's a deployment wizard that creates these packages. Now, if you've used PhoneGap's service, it's similar to that, but if you're using an IDE like this, you don't have to go out of the IDE. You simply right-click on the project and say, okay, build me an IPA for iOS, APK for Android, et cetera, et cetera. All right. The last thing I want to do with our 20 minutes is talk about opportunities. So I always wonder, like, because a lot of times I ask customers, I said, okay, so are you interested in mobile? Yes. When are you going to do mobile? In the next 6 months, right? And that really never comes true. So what I wanted to show you is that there's interesting opportunities out there, because I think we tend to look at, TechCrunch and all this and think like, man, I got to make that next messaging app. How did I miss out on WhatsApp, right? So I think there's opportunities in general, and they're in the business and productivity app market. Now, business and productivity is in the space of like the Box.nets, Dropbox, Trello. But in essence, this market space, Vision Mobile has estimated, is going to be $58 billion. So it's not going to beat the consumer market, obviously, but that's huge. That's a lot of opportunity that I don't think most people are thinking about. Now, where exactly is it at? It's by 2016, they estimate that it's going to be not necessarily in-app advertising. That's still going to be huge, but in contract development, right? So 63 billion. Now, contract development, this is where most companies out there, because they don't have the expertise, rely on you guys. They're going to rely on you to get some solution out there, and they're going to want it cross-platform. So, again, I say choose a good framework. If you don't choose ours, fair enough. But choose a good framework that solves the problem. And right now, companies have problems. So, business apps, look how small that piece of the donut is. But it's $1 billion. So, it's nothing to sneeze at, right? Now, what's more interesting, though, is this chart. So, in the consumer space, most apps don't make money. I think most people know this, right? And that's why they've turned to in-app advertising. You've probably heard now, if you make an app, consumer app, it has to be free, and you have to put in advertising to make any kind of decent money. And that's because, well, first of all, one, most apps suck, right? Most apps don't solve a problem. Most apps are trying to be the next Flappy Bird or the next Farm XYZ. There isn't really anything innovative, right? A few of them are, but most apps tend to be on the sucky side. But what's useful about the business apps is there's much less in the poverty line, and the middle range income is much higher, and the high income range is much higher as well. So if you're going to target, my suggestion would be think about how you can help a business solve their problem. And finally, where should you invest, right? As you saw earlier, Android owns the market. Android is everywhere. Now, once again, I don't want to get into what phone you have in your pocket and what you like or you don't. I've got nothing against Android. The chart just says iOS developer, iOS customers tend to pay for apps more than Android developers. So you may want to start there. All right. I'm going to end a little bit early so we can take some questions. But my general philosophy is, you know what? Choose, do what makes you happy. If you want to be a native developer, go for it. Because sometimes in these talks, native developers come to the talk and they say, yeah, but the hybrid stuff I've tried stinks, or it's just not there. It depends what you do. And I've had native developers come to me and say, you know what? I've used this and I didn't want to learn Java, so I'm going to stick with my native iOS app. But when I go to Android, thank God, because there's thankfully iOS only has 2 or 3 sizes that you have to worry about. Android has quite a few more, so it makes it a little bit harder. So this framework is responsive. It solves that issue. All right, HTML5 rocks, right? So if you do love native, more power to you, man, but I'm an HTML5 guy. We talked about mobile opportunities. They're out there. I don't know if you're thinking about them at all. And if you do decide, if you have an idea in that space, I hope you choose our stuff, and I hope you tell me about it, because I want to know. So learn more at this js.devexpress.com. And I'm going to spend a couple of slides to just tell you JS or even this address will work as well. We have a set of widgets. Now, I've talked about mobile, and you say, hey, Mehul, you said multi-platform. We support multi-platform. So we've got desktop client-side stuff now, because I was out there talking about this stuff, and everybody's like, what about Angular? What about Angular? So Angular, for me, I know it's changed, right? Angular, for me, was very much great for desktop client-side apps. But that's changing. They're getting much friendlier to mobile. In fact, I hear that the next version is going to be much better towards mobile as well. For us, it doesn't matter. When we created this framework, we wanted to be very open source friendly. So we didn't try to reinvent things that have already been solved. For example, we use jQuery binding and knockout binding out of the box. And we did that just because we knew that we wanted to get options out there. But it was a framework. So one of the biggest things we did was we said, people don't want to use our framework. People are using something already. They're using Bootstrap, Angular, etc. So now we've converted them to widgets. So if you just want to widgetize your app with our stuff, and that's what we specialize. We're in the UI business. We made grids, charts, all that stuff for years. We know the APIs very well. We know what your customers like. We know what excites them. And that's why a lot of developers come to us. So Use our stuff freely. Use it as a widget. Don't use our framework, but definitely check it out. And we're into all of this stuff. We win all these kind of Jolt awards, et cetera, et cetera. So come by our booth. We've got all of this stuff that we cover. If that doesn't make sense, there's a more confusing donut chart. But I do want to I want to show you this stuff. So if you want to come by, there's a charting library that I didn't talk about that does the same set of thing as well. It's all client-side HTML5 widgets. It renders using SVG. You can use it in any HTML5 browser. I showed you a little bit with that sales dashboard demo. And we've also got this thing called Test Cafe. It's we say test any web on any device. And that's because it uses Node. So most functional testing things out there have a thick client that needs to be run somewhere. This runs in the browser. So there's things we can do that no other testing frameworks can do. One, like work anywhere, right, that has HTML5 on it. The one that I really like to talk about is, let's say, the second largest browsing experience from a mobile device is not, let's say, on an iOS, is not Safari. Can you guess what it is? Which one? Chrome? No. That's right. Facebook is the second largest, if not the largest. It's fast becoming it. And that's obvious, right? Because absolutely, it does. That's exactly right. So when I do the Test Cafe talk, I talk exactly about that, because if you are going to make a mobile experience, please test in-app browsers. Because in-app browsers, number one, suck, and two, are difficult to figure out what is limited and what isn't in there, right? Depending on the app. But Facebook, I mean, it's just obvious, right? Like when I see, hey, this kid was riding a bike and you'll never believe what happened next. And I go, I got to know what happens next. I got to click that. Those damn headlines, I hate them, but they make me click them. So anyways, we end up browsing through that, and so do our customers, right? They share the links. We have this page on Facebook where we're sharing all sorts of solutions about how to do things. I couldn't imagine development on an iPad. People do it. But, unfortunately, I'm just like an old school guy like that, where I just have to have like a larger screen with a keyboard. But that's me, right? But a lot of people like to read things. They like to, browse things that way. So we have that product we'd like to show you if you're interested as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate you guys coming out. Any questions? Please. Yeah.
Maybe I'll save the other one for congratulations, first of all, for winning Best in Show.
Oh, thank you.
Last week.
Thank you very much.
Not you personally, of course.
No, it was all me.
Was it all you? Okay.
Yes.
And then, so the question: could you talk about IDE a little bit more? You were saying something about Visual Studio. Do these wizards and things, can I use those in Visual Studio Express or a Web Matrix or in any other IDE, or kind of what's the minimum level
Right.
of Visual Studio, for instance, that you need to run the?
This is where we get into like you can't use it in the Express edition. So Microsoft makes free versions of their IDE, is what he's mentioning. They put limitations because they're free, because they want you to buy, the 3,000 a year license, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't blame them. I get it. But unfortunately, it's not something it's not in our hands, right? Now, that said, I'm a big Sublime fan, but you won't get those wizards and those kind of things in there. We're thinking about maybe making some kind of package that you can get started easily within Sublime, like a file new experience or something like that, or something you can get from their store. So we're thinking about it. It all depends on demand, really. So.
Okay. But the standard team edition, you don't have to be ultimate.
No, just even professional is fine. So. Please.
Question regarding local storage. Do you do offline and incremental loading and those kinds of things? Because your example is just once loading into the file, for example.
Right.
How do you save it and those kinds of things?
Great question. First of all, I'll repeat the question. What about local storage? Is okay. So there are several stores, data stores that you can use. One of them being the local, right? So you can integrate even with, I don't know if you heard of Breeze.js or any technology out there, client-side technology out there. As I said, we've made the framework very capable that way. So even if you aren't using the framework, right, because that comes with our framework, you can just use the widget that can bind to it as well. So the short answer is yes, you can use any local data store. Yes, please.
I think I might know the answer to this already, but what I'd be most interested in, I guess, would be widgetizing, right? Because I build web apps on server. What's great about that is I don't have any clients. I got a Chromebook, so I just have a SSH app through that in the browser.
Yep.
So an ideal setup for me would be something like this that I could maybe run headless to build all these files and things. Do you guys have any kind of roadmap or any kind of current solutions, I guess, for like someone like me who want to sort of actually integrate everything into one sort of push, right?
Let me. That's a very interesting question. It's a very complex question.
And it's
Let's.
an outlier too, yeah.
No worries, no worries. Let's take. Can I address it right afterwards?
Totally, yeah.
Okay. So, any other questions, please?
Support all versions of each platform. For example, on iOS, iOS 6 is very different from 5. So
iOS 6 versus iOS 7, yes. So exactly. So what we did was we have our designers study those guidelines, right? And they make it exactly to those specifications. So absolutely, we support iOS 6, iOS 7, Windows Phone 8. Great question. Thank you. All right, guys. I'll be around. Please come by the booth. We have these shirts. Oh, drink tickets. I'll be happy to share these with you as well. So, and not just because you came to my talk, but clearly you guys are the awesomest bunch. So you deserve a good drink ticket. Thank you very much, guys.
Also, you guys have very beautiful like dashboard demos.
Yeah.
Like for those executives.
Yeah.
So is it this use case? Is it like you guys have a JavaScript SDK that you could?
Yes, we do. We do.
Okay.
So, do you want to see the chart stuff?
Yeah, I think I saw. I think I
Okay.
browsed it.
Would you like one?
Sure. I think I saw that in the demo.
Drink tickets. So I should mention they're in the
It's a
Grand
party,
Foyer.
right?
Yeah, Grand Foyer at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. They'll be giving out drinks. You'll need a ticket. So come grab them. I mean,
Thank you.
I won't be able to use them, so please do. Thank you, guys.
So is it? I learned that is it like you guys the SDK if there's long commit.